Thank you, Mel, and good to see everybody. I hope that I can share a few things with you that maybe you haven't thought of or noticed before. So let's start with INI files, and INI stands for initiation files. They're files that N1MM and other programs, but N1MM uses to set things up. And I'll give you some clues as to why you might want to use multiple INI files. I'll show you how to create them. And as in most of my talks, there are not any secrets in this. Everything's in the documentation somewhere. Part of the challenge is just finding it, but I'll show you where many of those things are. So I'll start with sharing my screen.
Okay, your screen has come up.
Yes, I moved this over so it would be easier for me to see, and then my little, all the people hit it. Okay, this is a typical N1MM layout, maybe not typical, but a minimal layout to do a sideband contest. And so what I've got here is an entry window, the check window, score, and the multipliers worked, and the band map and the log. So not very many things there, but a minimal setup. That one's pretty easy to replicate, so that wouldn't be too difficult. You might want different INI files, either for different contests, or perhaps you have a radio that you prefer to use for sideband and a different one for CW contests. And there can be set up in the config, but I find it easier to have different INI files, at least once you figure out how to do that. And for sure, a different layout is required for RTTY. Here's one that I have for RTTY. Let me change my mode here on the radio. That one is a much more complicated layout than a simple sideband one, and where all the windows go and how you get them set up. I can't remember from one time to another how to set them up. So I have different INI files for RTTY, for CW, and if I did sideband, I might have those, but I don't usually do those. So that's why you might want, and then I've got several other windows that are on another monitor. So that's why I like to have different INI files. So I'll close this thing and go back to the simple one. Okay, so this is like I said, a fairly simple sideband setup. And when you close N1MM, what it always does is it saves the window positions that you had up. And then when you start it again, it brings it back just like it was. So sort of remember where all these things are, and I'll close it. And then start it again. And there, everything came back like it was before. So some of the windows that we don't have in this one is we'll assume that we're going to operate unassisted, so we don't need the telnet window, and we don't need the available mults window. But if we were to do a CW contest, then we would add those. So we'll just add those now. Here's the telnet window. And let's add the available mults window. And as I showed in one of the other ones, I like it over here next to the band map. And so we got a little different layout now. Normally we wouldn't watch the telnet window because all that information appears over here in the band map and in the available mults, but a different layout for the different modes. And again, if we close N1MM and then restart it, it comes back just like we had it. Okay. Now I will go through how to set up an INI file. So we'll use that CW example, and I closed N1MM, and you need to know a few things, a few background things. N1MM has information stored in two different locations. The first one is well, not that. If you installed N1MM as the default comes up, then it's going to be on your C drive in program files, x86, and in N1MM logger. And there's that path. Okay, that's the executable files. Generally, you don't change any of these things, or you change very few of them. Then the other one is the user modifiable files. Those are the things that get changed on a daily basis. And those are typically on the C drive in, as I have in the corner there, N1MM Logger Plus. On this computer, I have two hard drives. And so I have that information on my D drive, but it's under the same name, N1MM Logger Plus. So there's all the files that get changed, not every time N1MM runs, but frequently. So the first thing we want to do, once you've got everything set up, like I had in that example, then you go to where the modifiable files are, typically C N1MM Logger, but in my case, it's on the D drive. And then you want to look for a file with that name there, N1MM space logger.ini. So you scroll down here and you look for it. And the easiest way right now to do it, since I just opened N1MM, it's going to be one of the most recent files modified. So I'll sort based on the date modified. And there it is at the top, N1MM logger.ini. Typically, though, it's going to be buried down here amongst all these other things. So again, you look for N1MM logger.ini, and it's right there what I highlighted. Okay, we want to make a copy of that. So right, this is the safest way to do this. If you start messing with files like this, you need to be careful. So I'll go through what I consider the safest way to do this. So let's right click on it and copy it, and then move the cursor over and right click in an empty space and hit the paste. And there it made N1MM logger -copy.ini. Now we want to rename that. So we right click on it, rename, and then rename it to something useful to you. In this case, I'm going to rename it to be K3 because that's the radio that I'm attached to. And we'll just call it demo because I'm not going to use it again, but well, I guess I'll name it something different. So rename K3 demo 2. Okay. Now then we want to remember that the name of that file. So either write it down, or if you use the cut and paste, except now I don't see where it went. I'm sorry, not cut and paste, snipping tool. I had all these things laid out nicely, but now they're, okay, here we go. So new, and we copy it. I think that's a handy thing to have when you want to write something down. So there's the name, K3 demo2.ini. Now then we need to go to the executable files. So that's on the C drive, program files, x86, N1MM logger. And this time what we want to look for is a file that's named N1MM logger.net.exe. You won't see those extents if you haven't turned on the look at the extents in your web in the file manager, but I have. So we want to look for that file. Here it is right here. N1MM logger.net.exe. We want to make a shortcut of that. So you right click on it to get that menu, and then create a shortcut. And it says Windows can't create a shortcut here. Do you want it to be placed on the desktop instead? Well, that's where we want it anyway. So yes, we want to put it there. And then we're through with the File Explorer. So let's close that. We still need this name. So we need that. And then over here in all my other icons that don't really pertain to this demo, there's the one that we just made. And it will always say N1MM logger in 3 dots and shortcut. So what we want to do on that one is right click on it, properties, then it's already highlighted for you, but you want to go to this target line, put your cursor in the target line, and use the arrow keys, not the backspace or the space, but the arrow keys to go all the way to the end. Then you need to type these things exactly. A space, INI equals, and then the name of the file that the INI file that you just created. So it's K3 demo2.ini. And if you didn't put any spaces in the name, which is, I recommend don't put spaces in, it makes life a lot easier. You don't need to put quotes around it. So when you rename that INI file, don't put any spaces in there, makes it much simpler. So you add space INI equals, and then whatever name you named it, .ini. Then you hit the apply, and then you say, okay. So now then, this one will open with that K3 demo 2 INI file. So we click it, double click on it, and there it is. There's the CW one that we had before. So we know that it works. And just to show you that it really will come back to the right thing, I'm going to get rid of the telnet window and exit it, close it. We don't need this anymore. Now here's the first one that I had. And that got changed to the CW one with the telnet window. So I'll close that. And then I'll go back here to this new one that I created. And it doesn't have the telnet window. Okay. Trivial differences in what I demonstrated, but that's the idea of how you go about setting up different INI files. And as I said, all this is in the manual, and there's the URL for where it is in the N1MM manual to set up multiple INI files. Kind of trivial for CW versus sideband, not so trivial for a different radio, and in my book, very non-trivial to set up for RTTY contests or anything else where you have different windows that you want in various places. So anywhere you move these around, it'll come back and remember them for the next time around. Okay, so that's INI files, the quick version. And again, right there is the URL that N1MM explains how to do that. All right, now let's talk about function keys a little bit. Function keys are the keys up at the top of your keyboard, numbered or named F1 through F12. And what they do is they send CW for you. Or if you're very good and set everything up just right, they'll also send sideband voice files for you. I'll just talk about the CW one because although CW may be more difficult to do, how things get set up are much more straightforward. Okay, so let's look at the default CW function key files that comes with N1MM. It's in wherever the changeable files are, which is usually C, but on mine it's on D, the D drive, and then N1MM logger, then function key messages. And normally you don't have CW and RTTY, but I separate mine in my function key files into CW and RTTY. But you will have this one that says CW default messages.mc. And that name is right there. So we'll look at it in a text browser because these are just ASCII files. So let's open it. And I've got everything big so that hopefully you can see things. This is an example file. And the things to note right off is that many of the lines start with a pound sign. Any line that starts with a pound sign means that it's a comment and it doesn't get assigned to the function keys. So all this stuff up here, that's comment lines. So this has some good reminders. It's not a good tutorial on how to do message files, but it's a good reminder. Then the next thing to notice is that the first 12 lines that don't have a pound sign, those are like this says right here, those are the run messages. The next 12 that don't have a pound sign in front of them, those are the S&P messages. And you need to remember that the first 12, no matter what they say that don't have a pound sign, those are the things that get assigned to the run messages. And the next 12 that don't have a pound sign are the ones that get assigned to the search and pounce messages. Each line that gets assigned, that's not a function key, or that's not a comment line, has three parts. The first part well, let's look at this one. This is more straightforward. F8, a space, AGN question mark. That's the title that appears in N1MM on the function key buttons, which I'll show you when we bring N1MM up again. And then the next thing is a comma, which separates the two pieces. And then this part, in this example, it's AGN question mark. So that's what gets sent. So if you hit the F8 key and run, you will send on CW, it'll send again in a question mark. This one, this F7 spare, that'll be the title, and then the comma, and there's nothing after it, so that nothing gets sent if you hit F7. It doesn't pause or do anything, it sends nothing. Now then there's a bunch of macros. Here, let's look at this F1 key. First it sends CQ test, and then a space, and then anything that's inside the curly brackets is a macro. And a macro is letters or combinations of letters that gets translated into something else. This particular one gets translated into my call. And my call is what is set in N1MM when you set up the station data. So for me, if I was using this, it would, and I hit F1, it would send CQ test K7TQ a space, and then it would send it again, my call. So it would send CQ test K7TQ, K7TQ. Okay. Then F2, and here's another macro, sent RST cut. What that macro translates to is it sends 5NN, which the ends mean 9. So that translates to 599, but what gets sent is 5NN. And it, because it's a cut number and because it has cut here. And then it sends the exchange. And the exchange is what you defined when you set up the contest. And I'll show you where that is when we go back to N1MM also. Big thing to remember here is that when you set up the exchange, you don't put the RS or the RST in the exchange. You put it here in the function key files. Okay. And then here on number 5, which sends his call, this exclamation mark, that means to send whatever you've got in the call sign window, in the call sign box, in the entry window. So if you put WB5QMP, it would send that. If you hit F5, and it'll send even partial calls. It doesn't care what whether it's a complete call or not. So if you said AB7, or if we typed in AB7 there and hit the F5, it would send AB7. So the exclamation mark sends the call that's in the entry window. Then those we've already seen. Then F12 is defined as wipe, and there's the curly brackets and wipe. That does the same thing as Alt-W. It clears out everything that's in the entry window gets cleared out with a wipe. So a handy way to do a Alt-W if it's easier to do F12 for you than to do Alt-W. This is a good starting place. It's a handy one to look at to try to remember what goes on. But let's look at a customized one. So the example that I have is nope, wrong one. It's this one. We'll go back to the one that we created. Yep. Okay. So this, I need to get the right file. All right. I already set this up. This is QSO party for Washington Salmon Run, what the WA here has, and it's CW, and it's a fixed. And here's the send exchange. I'm going to play like I'm in Whitman County. So I enter WHI. That's the exchange. Don't put 599 in there, but put Whitman or Spokane, whatever county you're going to operate from. And hit the OK. And let's run the radio back to CW. There, now we're in a CW portion. And let's play like we're ready to run. Now let's take a look at the macro, at the function keys that I've set up for the salmon run. I'll do that again for you. So to look at what you've got to find here, you go to any of the buttons and you right click on them, and it brings up the CW message editor or the sideband message editor. This is greatly simplified. It doesn't have any comments in it. I took all those out. But what it does do is, again, the first 12 are blue and the second 12 are green. So the first 12 are the run messages. The second 12 are the search and pounce messages. So here for F1, what I have is F1CQ. That's the little label that appears down here. And then what it sends is CQ-SR, meaning salmon run. And then this asterisk is another way to, another version of my call. I use it. So it sends CQ-SR, K7TQ. And then this clear RIT macro, that's, suppose I had to use the RIT to tune somebody that was calling me off band, that will clear it out. I think most radios have that, mine does. So it gets me back, gets my receive and transmit back in the same place. Then the exchange that I have, here I have F2, and then in the curly brackets, exchange. And when that's in the title, as you can see down here, it translated that and it put Whitman, which is, or puts it WHI, which is what I had in the in this contest setup. And I send 5NN. I prefer to put that. You can put the send RST cut if you want to, but I prefer 5NN. You put whatever you want there, but you do need to put the RST there, and then Whitman, because I'm going to be in Whitman all the time if I was fixed. So that's my exchange, and the title appears down here. F3, thank you, and then K7TQ, the asterisk, and it clears the RIT, another one. Here I have F6, just says empty, so that it doesn't do anything. This is one that I added, and it shows a couple of things. And the title for that one is F7 nil. Suppose I'm calling and somebody answers me, and we have several rounds, and I still, after several tries, I can't get his exchange. So I'm ready to just give up. So I could just move on and act like I got him, or just CQ back in his face. But I think it's nicer to send that particular string. And what that will send, if I hit the F7, it will send his call. That's what the exclamation mark is. And then sorry, SRI, nil. I can't copy you at all. And then the curly bracket where it says F1, that means it then shifts and sends the F1 key. You can put any number you want in there. So this would send AB7TK, sorry, nil, and then it sends CQ, salmon run, K7TQ. It leaves the information in the entry window just in case the conditions get a little bit better and I can hear him. Then it's not that I have to, whoops, I forgot what his call was. It got all wiped out. So you would typically, if you use this, I would send the CQ would get sent. And if he doesn't answer me, then I do an Alt W. I prefer that, but F12 would work too. Well, not in this set, but Alt W, cleared out, and I'm ready to go again. I think it's a little nicer than leaving the other person in doubt about whether you got his information or you didn't. Okay. The F9 key could be defined or can be done in several ways, but this is if I get a part of his call, like if I copy AB7, but I don't know what the rest was. If I hit the F9, it will send, well, the exclamation mark means it will send his call or whatever piece is in the call sign line in the entry window, and then a question mark. So it just automatically, well, not automatically, but it will send AB7 question mark. So that tells the other person, I need more of your call. To me, it's better than just sending a question mark. This one is more focused. It's more specific. If you had a little pile up and you got AB7, but not the rest, somebody else covered him up, then hopefully only AB7 would answer. At least it's worth a try. F10 asks, that part to the left of the cursor is the label. And so it asks, sends QTH and a question mark. So I want to know what your QTH is. And typically I would use that in the salmon run if somebody I thought was probably not in Washington. So I want to know their state. To me, it's quicker than spelling out state. Everybody recognizes QTH. So that's for out-of-state ones. F11, if I think he's in Washington, then I would hit the F11 key and it would send county. So then the person might reply PIE for Pierce, and I'm ready to go. And the 12 one is a long way, a convoluted way, but I think I do use it occasionally. If I'm not sure of the call, then I'll hit the F12 at some point. Well, before I tell him thank you, before I finish the QSO, and it will send is your call, and then whatever I have in the call box in the entry window. So it says is your call AB7TK with a question mark. And most people will understand that, or at least they'll figure out call and a question mark. So they'll repeat their call so that you can be sure of be sure of who you're talking to. Okay, so those are these first 12 that are in blue are the run ones. Now let's look at the ones that the S&P ones. And I got rid of that and switched over to S&P so you can see the labels down here. So again, right click on any of the buttons and it brings up the editor. So F1 in the search and pounce ones, F1 in search and pounce, unless you do a lot of things to make it not do that, it would just let it be, let it do what it wants to do. It will switch you from search and pounce into the run mode. So if you hit the F1 in search and pounce, it'll switch you over to the run mode. And I have defined here QRL, which means is this frequency in use? Better than just jumping on a frequency and thinking it's yours. So it'll send QRL, and then you wait a little bit, and then you can start CQing with the run keys. Okay, the F2 line, you'll note that it has in the title, it has 2 ampersands. What's translated to down here is just a single one. I'm not sure why, but I think because the ampersand means something else. So to get an ampersand in the labels of the keys, you got to have 2 of them together. And then, so in this particular definition, I've included, even though I'm in search and pounce, I include the person that was calling CQ that answered me. That's what the exclamation mark does. Then 5NN for the signal report, and then Whitman, WHI. And I don't repeat Whitman twice. Okay. The F3, thank you, which is EE, which is dit, a frequently used thing by CW operators. And then I've got another empty one. And then this rarely gets used in search and pounce. But there's another sorry nil. So again, a way to end the QSO if you can't find some, I mean, if you can't get the call and you don't want to keep fighting it. This time it doesn't send F1 because you're in search and pounce. Let's look at the F10 key. This one is QTH. And this one, it sends Whitman twice. So if I answer with the F2 and the person that called CQ sends county or a question mark, then I know he wants to know what my county is. It doesn't need the 599 again. Everybody knows what that is, so don't send that again. So you hit F10, and it will send Whitman, Whitman, WHI, WHI, sends it twice. And it sends twice because it's an answer to the fact that he didn't get it the first time. Okay, so that, and F11 is essentially the same thing, except I've labeled it county. And again, it sends Whitman twice. Then here's something I think is useful. QTH or F10 is QTH up here in the run, and it's QTH down here in the search and pounce. So in the run one, you're asking for the QTH, and in the search and pounce, you're giving it. So you don't have to remember which is the proper key. Just remember that F10 is the answer to the first question that gets asked, which in this case would be what county you're in. The other nice thing to remember is if you hold down the shift and hit any of the F keys, then whatever mode you were in, it will send the function key that goes with the opposite mode. So if I'm in run up here, if I'm in the run mode and I send 599 Whitman and the person wants to know what county I'm in, then I can either send it with the paddle, of course, or I can hit the shift and hit the F10, and they will send this line, the opposite mode. So we'll send Whitman, Whitman. Okay, so a handy thing to remember, hold the shift down, hit one of the F keys, any of the F keys, then it will send the other thing, the other definition for whatever mode you're in. Okay, let's cancel that. Then a couple other things to keep in mind when you use the function keys. Let's open the configure and then go to function keys. Most of these things in function keys, you can just take the defaults. That's the simplest thing to do. Send leading zeros in serial numbers. Some people like that, some don't. The default, I believe, is off. In RTTY contests, I think it's worthwhile, but that's up to you. Send cut numbers. Europeans really like that. That doesn't affect the 5NN one, but you can check that if you want to. And if you do, then you need to go down here to where it says cut number style, if enabled, and pick from that list how you want the cut numbers to be. What's shown there is the simplest one, which the zero gets a T, but there's other ways to do it. Again, that's up to you. I don't think cut numbers are all that wonderful. But anyway, send correct call before QSO. Let's talk about that one a little bit. If you typed in a wrong call and you got it straightened out, you made your exchange and you got it straightened out, and what you had was AB7TD and it really was AB7TK, and you corrected it, then it will, before the QSO is over, if you're running, it will send AB7TK to let the person on the other end know that you got his call right. If you don't do that, then the other person is liable to, and probably should, try to make sure that you got the call right so you both don't lose the QSO. That's a good one to have checked. Send partial calls. That's another one to talk about a little bit. Suppose you've got WA0 or WA0, WWA. That's what you thought got what you heard. So if you got that in the window, and then you fill in and you find out he's in Spokane, and then you realize, oops, that's Jay, that's not that. So you change it to WA0 WWW. If you have checked send partial calls, then it will send WWW, the piece that got changed. If you don't check it, or if you uncheck it, it will send WA0 WWW, the full call. I prefer to hear the whole thing, not just the partial one, but again, that's up to you. Most of the rest of these, just leave them checked. Use CW contest word spacing, stop sending CQ when a call sign is changed. If you got break in and you hear somebody calling and you're calling CQ, but you hear somebody answering, you just start typing his call and the CQing will stop. Then this ESM sends your call once in S&P and then ready to copy received exchange. This is often called the big gun switch. So if you think, if you're loud and you're running a kilowatt and you got big antennas, then almost always people are going to get your call in one try. So I would send K7TQ. I'm sorry, I would type in WA0 WWW, hit the enter, and it would move the cursor over to the exchange field. And I'm ready to copy what he sends. But if there's a pileup or I don't have a kilowatt and big antennas, then he might not get me on the first one. So I just keep it, I leave the cursor in the call sign so that when I hit the enter again, it will send my call. Usually, well, I always have that unchecked. And then work dupes when running, that one should be left checked as well, so that you don't argue or don't discuss with somebody whether you worked them again or whether you worked them previously or you didn't. And another one, this block of keys down here that starts with, make sure that the key mappings defined below match the contents of the keys as defined in the in your file. The best advice is don't mess with those. Those are set up so that F1 is the CQ key, the end of the QSO is the F3 key, and on all the others. If you really want to get in trouble or you really think you know what you're doing, you can mess with those. But Randy's advice is don't mess with those. It causes a lot of trouble if you do. All right, so then you say, okay, and you're ready to go. So 3 things I'd like you to take away from this piece about function keys. The first one is that the first 12 lines that don't have a pound sign in front of them, those are your run keys. The second 12 that don't have a pound sign in front of them, those are the search and pounce keys. And the other thing, don't change those key mappings or you'll have a lot of difficulty, and it will be very difficult to explain to somebody else where your problems are and for them to help you out. Okay, let's look at a few editing call sign things. I've got my radio in test mode, so it won't transmit over the air. So let's do that one example, WA0, move that out of the way, WWA. And so I call him and he answers me. So I'm in search and pounce mode. So I call him, and Jay's smart enough to realize that, well, he doesn't see that I put in WWA. So he replies to me and he says Spokane. So I type in SPO, and the check mark over by SPO means that it's a good abbreviation for this contest. That also shows up in this box in the check. And over here, it suggests that, move that down, it suggests that the real answer, the real call is WA0 WWW. And soon we realize, yeah, that's right. So what we want to do is we want to get the cursor in the call window, in the entry window, back over to the call window. So like we always do to change in those spaces, hit the space bar. So now we're back to the call sign part. And if you can remember this is very handy. So we got to work on it. But if you hold down the control and then hit space, the first thing it highlights is the prefix. You do it again, it highlights the number. You do it one more time, and it highlights the suffix. So we know that really we wanted www, so we simply type it in. That way we don't have to use the arrow keys and the backspaces and that. So that's a control and a space. Highlights the prefix, then the number, then the suffix. But you've got to be in the call window for it to do it. And then we got it right. So we hit the space over and we hit the enter and we log him. So he's up here logged. Another handy one to do. Let's suppose we think we hear AB7TD, and we call. And one of the first things we should notice is this question mark. That it wasn't really, well, that means that call is not in the master list. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's not in the master list. So we call and no, we can't get him. So we want to get rid of that. So we can backspace, use the backspace like this to get rid of the whole thing, but that's a lot of keystrokes. So let's do a different one. If you do shift and then home, which aren't the easiest keys to find on my keyboard, but shift and the home, then it highlights the entire call, and you can either type it correctly or hit the delete key and it all goes away. So a couple of quick things, entry things to take care of. And let's get a little more in the log. Let's do AB7TK. And well, I hit the tab by mistake back here. To hit the space, we go over to Exchange. That guy's in Idaho, and we log him. Now then, that's not many contest, or not very many cues to having a contest, but here's how, when the contest is over, you make your Cabrillo log to send in to the sponsor. So you're all done with the contest. It's over. File, generate Cabrillo file. And it says it will be using the send exchange WHI. That's fine. You can read that, but we like that. So you say, okay. Your category single op assisted, one transmitter, all bands, CW, low power, fixed, which is what we set up when we set up the contest. Yep, that's what we want to do. So we say yes. And where these always get saved to is the changeable part of N1MM, which on mine is D, but probably on yours is C, and in export files. And it always starts out, the name it wants to use is whatever station name that you had. For me, it's K7TQ.log. So we want to save it there. And then down here, it says export is complete. You can edit it before sending it, or you can email it. So if you choose email, there. If you have set up Microsoft Outlook, it will go through and email it for you. You have to know where to email it to. It doesn't know that. But if you have it set up, then you can do that. I don't use Microsoft Outlook, so I don't use that. So what I do in that, one of the choices, I'll do it again. And I'll overwrite it. I just hit cancel. So it has saved it to export files. Then the other one I think worth saving is export and the score summary. And it's your call sign and then score summary.txt. And it also goes to the export files. So we save that. Okay. And then Again, all the contests will be saved to the export file, so you might want to save them over to some other file. I have a folder on my D drive that's labeled contests, and it has all the contests that I've ever operated in, and then each of those has year in there. So then I would, in File Explorer, drag and drop those into the appropriate places. Okay, so that's the few things that I have to share with you. Anybody have any questions or comments, things that they do? This would be the time for it.
Oh, hey, Randy, on the, am I coming through okay? It's Jay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, okay. When you put the shortcut on the desktop, and of course that was one shortcut. I'm not sure if you talked about it, but like on mine, I have 4 shortcuts on my desktop. I've got 2 radios and then CW phone and RTTY. So that comes out to 4 different shortcuts. So I'll get the one out there, and then I'll copy it to a second shortcut on the desktop and then edit the INI file in that second shortcut and then change the name of the shortcut. So that's what I do.
Yep, anyway, I had that and I skipped it. This one that I made here, or any of them, if you right click on that and then rename, then you can name it to something useful to you.
Yeah, right.
N1MM K3 CWT or whatever. And then this is what I have. I have a folder that's N1MM starts.
Yeah.
And I have 2 radios that I can operate from. I have a set for K2, a set for K3, and if I try SO2R, so in the K3 one, there's the K3 CW and there's the K3 RTTY. So you can have multiple INI files, but you should name them something useful to you. Mm-hmm. Yep, a good point, Jay.
Yep. Yeah, I do the same thing. I start with the radio's name and then, 781 CW, 756 phone, that type of thing.
Good. I hope that you saw some things that maybe you hadn't tried before, or maybe cemented some of the things that you already knew.